Hello, my friends, and welcome to Beyond Fame. I am so excited you guys are here with me and my new friend of the show, Christopher Taylor. He is the owner and creator of Taylor Imagineering. If I could go back in time and take back all the money I spent on magic products, and if I found him very first, this would be where all my money would be going to because he really makes some pretty awesome products, and I wished I would have found you sooner, but I'm glad I found you now. And I got to see this fine gentleman perform a couple of weeks ago and fell in love with his performance. And he is what Beyond Fame is. He loves his craft, he loves sharing it with people. And so I'm so excited to have him all the way from Canada here with us. And Chris, how are you doing, my friend?
I'm terrific. Thanks, Daniel. It was a pleasure to run into you at the performance. That was fun. I had a great time performing in Salt Lake City.
Well, I could tell you did, and I loved every minute of it. And it just, I've been doing magic a long time, and you just blew me away. So, thank
That's
you.
great to hear.
So thank you for that. So, on Beyond Fame, on this video series, I figured that it's a podcast about talent, and I not only want to showcase you and your talent and your stories, but I also want to showcase your talent. So what we're going to do is I'm going to do a little something for you, and then I want you to do something for me and my guests. So if you
my pleasure.
Me and my listeners, so that would be great. This is brand new, so I'm a little nervous. This is prototyping it for you, so I hope you like it, and I hope it works. I have a deck that's mixed up here.
Yep.
All different. I am gonna give it a couple of cuts here, and then I want you to tell me a number 1 through 52. And just go with your first instinct.
14.
14. I'm going to try to look through Skype here and peer into your soul, and I'm going to make a prediction. All right, 14. Okay, I'm locked in here. So we're gonna count down 14 cards. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. There's the 14th card. You could have chosen any number.
Yeah.
Now, and you haven't seen me look at the card. I haven't done any peeks or anything like that.
Nope.
I'm going to go with intuition here, and I think you've got a red card. I'm going to go. You're a manly man, so I'm not going to go diamonds. I'm going to go hearts, and I'm going to go ace through. It's going to be lower. I'm going to go with the 8 of hearts.
Okay.
The 8 of hearts.
14.
So here we go. Moment of truth. There's the 8 of hearts.
Right on.
And then right after you, right when you told me your number, I did write down a prediction, and I wrote down.
Oh.
I wrote down the 8 of hearts.
I like the kicker.
Thank you. So there you go. Playing around with it.
Well, that was right on.
Thank you.
I have no idea how you did that.
Well, my friend, the floor is yours.
Well, you asked me to have something to show you.
Yes.
This is one of my favorites. It is well, it's a bit strange, kind of like me. I've got two sets of photographs. These women all have something tragic in common. They were all murdered in various parts of Great Britain between the years of 1911 and 1915. These men were connected with those murders one way or another. Now, 5 murders. Scotland Yard was swamped, totally swamped, and the murders went unsolved for a while, for a number of years, until a very gifted psychic stepped up and lent her talents. Her technique was fascinating. She was able to match, through her technique, suspects with victims, and then that allowed the Scotland Yard to focus their investigations. And to their credit, they went that route and were able to solve all 5 mysteries.
Wow.
Let me show you her technique. It was fascinating. She held the names of the victims in mind, and then used the names to match suspects with victims. And this is how she did it. She might have gone, like the first name was Mary. She might have gone M-A-R-Y, just according to her intuition. Or she might have gone M-A-R-Y, which would result in a completely different match, you would agree. So, Daniel, let's do a little assessment of your skill.
Oh boy,
this
okay.
area. I'll tell you what, I will spell the names, and since you were quite a distance away, you will just point to which pile I should move a photograph in, just according to your intuition. All right.
Okay.
And we'll see, well, maybe you'll get 1 match or 2. We'll see how well you do.
Can I?
All right.
Instead,
so the first one is
instead
Mary.
of pointing, can I just say men or women?
Oh, okay. Yes, that's a better way to do it. Yes. Mary.
Okay.
M.
Man.
A.
Man.
R.
Woman.
And Y.
Man.
Okay. Now that you've matched this man, I won't call him a gentleman, and this woman.
Okay.
Place those right there. Beverly. B.
Woman.
E.
Woman.
V.
Woman.
E.
Man.
R.
Man.
L.
Woman.
Y.
Man.
Now you can see if you'd have stayed with the women, that would have been a completely different match.
Right.
And Betty. B.
Man.
E.
Man.
T.
That one's hazy. I'm gonna go woman.
T.
Man.
Y.
Woman.
That matches these 2.
Okay.
And Grace. G.
Woman.
R.
Woman.
A.
Man.
C.
Man.
E.
Woman.
And that matches these 2. Now, these 2 are matched by default,
Sure.
but still according to your intuition.
Yeah.
You matched Frank Reeves. This is Frank. It says Frank Reeves, executed for the 1912 murder of Grace Davies.
Okay.
Is this Grace?
I don't
Yes,
know.
it says Grace, murdered, Birmingham, 1912.
Wow.
Well, that might have been a coincidence, Daniel. We don't know. How about
Okay.
this one? This is Percy Rush, executed died in prison awaiting sentence for the 1911 murder of Patricia Robinson. And this says Patricia, murdered, Brighton, 1911. Another match.
Wow. That's a
The
match.
hair on the back of my neck's beginning to stand up here. This is Harry Thompson.
I'm thinking I'm in the wrong line of work here. I should
You
go
could
work for
be.
Scotland Yard.
Harry Thompson, executed for the 1915 murder of Mary Coleman. And this is Mary, murdered, Cornwall, 1915.
Wow.
This is Walter Brooker, convicted of the 1914 murder of Beverly Fletcher, died in prison. And this is Beverly, murdered 1914 in London. And finally, this is Betty, murdered Manchester 1913. And this is David Hill, hung for the 1913 murder of Betty Ryder. You have a frightening gift, my friend.
Thank you. I need to go bet on some horses now.
Yes, but they have to be dead.
Oh, that's all right. Well, thank you so much. That was great.
This is an effect that I call overkill, and
cleverly named.
It uses a very old principle, but that I discovered and researched it. Did a lot of research on it myself, and found that you can. You have a great deal of leeway as to how you can match the cards and the names that you can use and the length of the names and put them together. I was inspired by Jim Critchlow's effects, and Tony Chris as well inspired me. I wanted to work with photographs and something to do with murder and so a little bit spooky, and I put these two ideas. These cards are they're just beautiful. They're hand really aged by a fellow for me. They're custom made for me. I sell this on my website. These are sold as Overkill Elite with the actual hand aged cards, or you can. I have it as a download as well on my download page, where you print your own photographs. But it's a lot of fun.
That's great.
Performing that.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Well, let's talk some talent, Chris. What is your definition? Now, I know you're a smart guy, and I know you do a lot of research and you really take care in things that you do. So I'm really looking forward to your answer here. What is your definition of talent, sir?
Well, talent. I think that there are. I formulated my impressions on talent. It's something that I've thought a great deal about and researched, and my studies began through the martial arts. Studying to become the best martial artist I could. I came across some really interesting ideas. Firstly, that there are basically at the lowest, most fundamental level, there are only 3 kinds of talent. That's it on the planet. In human beings, there are only 3 kinds of talent, and then there are subsets of those talents, and those are physical, mental, and emotional talent. The most important physical talent, and it relates to both martial arts and magic absolutely equally, and that is the ability to relax, particularly to relax the muscles that you don't need to complete a movement. For example, if you want to palm a coin, if you watch someone like David Roth perform a classic palm, it's invisible. It's completely invisible. Yeah. Eric Jones, another person, if you watch his classic palm, it's flawless. And that is because he doesn't have any extra tension anywhere in his hand.
No.
Only the muscles, he's giving energy only to the absolute, the minimum amount he can get away with and still hold that coin. And he's done that through hours and hours, countless hours of practice, of course. In the martial arts, if you're going to do a punch, well, there are muscles that propel the punch, but there are also muscles that would hold that punch back. And through practice, you can, and mind and body practice, you can totally relax the muscles that are would prevent that extension, while tightening and using the muscles that propel the punch. So it's the same thing. So that's the greatest physical talent, and it's absolutely necessary for physical magicians, manipulators as well. The most important mental talent is the ability to focus your attention. This is essential. I was, when I was a child, well, it's still present as an adult, I was what is now called attention deficit, ADD, attention deficit disorder. And that is a bit of a misnomer, actually. Children and adults who are ADD don't suffer from a deficit in attention. Within their own mind, it is a deficit of stimulation in the environment. So if things aren't fascinating enough, interesting enough out there, then our thoughts turn inward, our attention turns inward towards our own thoughts, which are much more interesting. It certainly was for me, for example, in a math class. My attention would wander inward, and I would look like a complete idiot sitting in class, not following what was going on. But once ADD kids and adults find something interesting, well, then they have laser focus. We have laser focus. So the ability to focus your attention is aids you in learning hugely. I managed to mitigate my tendency to focus on my own thoughts through meditation, but that is the most essential mental talent, being able to focus your attention on, if you're on stage, being able to focus your attention on what you're doing and on the audience, observing the audience, seeing what their reactions are, seeing how you can respond to them, because all your actions by then are pretty well better be unconscious. So you're watching the audience, basically. So that's the most important mental talent. The most essential emotional talent, one that a lot of people don't think about, is the ability to make a mistake and not be crushed by that mistake. I mean, if you're on stage and something goes wrong a little bit, you can't show that something has gone wrong. You've got to recover immediately. So your emotions can't paralyze you. You have to move immediately to something else to cover your mistake. If you're learning something and you make a mistake, you can't waste any time or energy giving yourself heck. You can't, if you're berating yourself, if you feel diminished somehow by the fact that you've made a mistake, then you're not, well, then your learning slows down immensely. It's the same with if you're on stage and you make a mistake once again, not only must you stay focused mentally, but you can't allow your disappointment to paralyze you, and so those are the three most important talents, I think, and they can all be developed through training. They can be improved, I should say, through training, most certainly. And I think that's a perspective in magic that is we don't come across very often. And that is the idea of developing our talent or improving our talents through training. We say we have to practice, we have to rehearse, but actually, if you're learning something like Osterland's brilliant breakthrough card system or some other stack, that's sheer training, and all of those talents come into play to help you learn the stack and then to work with that training in performance. So those are my thoughts on talent. Maybe perhaps if you have any questions about that or where you want me to expand on something, just fire away.
I think that's really interesting that you bring up the three traits of it, because, and really though, it seems like because of that, you really can't have one without the other, because I think if you're focusing on strength, you're practicing your mental ability to focus on your strength and relaxing the other muscles. And then, of course, you know, you can't get too emotional if you miss a beat and you drop your palm coin or whatever. And so I think they all intertwine nicely, and I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, I think that's why I've noticed in my own training in magic, if I'm practicing something, if I'm training a move or a slide of a piece of a slide, or I'm working on a like for example, when I was learning the breakthrough card system, or my own index decoding system, I had it perfect sitting at the table practicing here without an audience. But as soon as an audience is in play, wow, all of a sudden it's difficult to focus, and it's difficult because now my attention is split between what I'm doing and what how the audience is reacting, and all the emotional stuff comes up. So yeah, that I think is probably why one performance is worth an hour of practice,
Right.
because all of those talents now are being taxed.
I laugh because this is a daily occurrence for me. I sit at a desk and during my day job, and so I get to talk on the phone with a lot of people, but at the same time, I'm a guy where my hands always have to be doing something, and so this is where my deck of cards comes in, and I'm always working on either the Erdnase or a shuffle, and I can do it perfectly there, and then when I think I have it down and I want to go show my boss, or I want to show my boss's kids, bam, it sucks, and it's just not where. And then I get frustrated with that, and then I keep going back and doing it. But yeah, so and I think every magician, and not only magic talent, but I think people who practice instruments, and really anything that takes effort and talent and work into it. I mean, you can probably play Mozart's piano piece and then, you know, mess it up when go play for somebody. So
yeah,
I think that's pretty interesting that it's across the board. So I had a question, and this just this is just for me. When you were talking about martial arts, tell me about the 1-inch punch. Is that real?
Well, if you go on Google, you can find a beautiful example of the 1-inch punch, which Bruce Lee made famous.
Yes.
If you watch really closely, it moves a heck of a lot more than 1 inch. But
yeah.
But he begins with the fist 1 inch away from the target, and then he's able to people who can strike with a tremendous amount of power in a small amount of distance, right, are masters at being able to develop a summation of forces from their legs, focused through the center of their body, and then up to the hands, kind of like a catapult. Okay. That comes around, and then the arm stops moving, and then the arm of the catapult stops moving, and then the next part of the rope part comes around, and the timing is perfect. So it's a summation of small forces, focused, and delivered all within a very short distance. So yeah, it's very real. Wow. Absolutely.
That's always fascinated me.
You can deliver a tremendous amount of power by touching a target with your middle finger, and then dropping your center, settling, and putting all of your weight and force through the palm of your hand, and you can deliver a tremendous amount of power with practice. But there are very few real targets, real opponents that will stand still long enough for you to do that.
A candle with a lit flame.
I beg your pardon?
A candle with a lit flame.
Yeah.
Put it out with the punch.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for answering that. That's always fascinated me, and I'm always curious with that stuff. So that's
Yeah.
great. Well, let's learn more about the strangeness of Chris Taylor, and I want to know your origin story. I want to know what got you started with your talent, and tell us more about yourself, please.
Wow. Okay. Pandora's box. Um, I began. Interestingly, there's a martial arts connection there too. The first time I ever saw a magician perform live, um, and this is uh, an event that happened to me that is 100% true. I was back many years ago. I knew nothing about magic, and I was invited to participate, though, to perform in a variety show going on a couple of 100 miles away from where I live now in British Columbia, up north. And this was when disco ruled. And when I was a lot more spry than I am now. Actually, at the time, I was the British Columbian sparring champion.
Wow.
In my lightweight division, and I was invited to come and perform kung fu choreographed to disco music. Sounds weird, but it was a lot of fun. So
I bet that's awesome.
I was in my 20s. I was single. There was going to be dancing girls as part of the show, so they were going to fly me up. So yeah, they treated me wonderfully, and so
you're like, I'm sold.
went. And I was rehearsing. And one of the other performers in the show was a magician, a young guy, barely old enough to be in the club, in the disco where we were going to be performing. So I was kind of watching him out of the corner of my eye practice, and he was watching me. And then I stopped and watched him because back then you could smoke in the club. So he had a cigarette, he blew a perfect smoke ring, and then he held his fist like this and he dropped this burning cigarette and he vanished the cigarette. How did you do that? And he said, magic. I said, no.
Good
How
answer.
did you really do that? And he said, magic. So I figured I wasn't going to learn anymore. So we did our performances, which went really, really well. They were really well perceived. But at the end of the show, neither of us were getting anywhere with the dancing girls. So we decided that we would go for a meal. It was pretty late at night, and the only place we could find was like a country and western pub. And they had really small. They had fantastic food. They had a really small postage stamp sized dance floor there, and there were a couple of couples on the dance floor. And this was classic rural British Columbia, and really, the dancing was awesome, and people there in their Stetsons and boots, cowboy boots, and real country and western place. It was really cool. And then I was sitting with my back to the wall, a magician in front of me. We'd ordered our food, and then it was like a scene out of a Jackie Chan movie. The doors flew open, and in walked a motorcycle gang. What are these guys doing here? They don't usually show up in places like this. And so they pulled a whole bunch of tables together so they could sit together. And they took up some space on this little dance floor. And people started making comments, and the wannabes in the motorcycle gang was making comments back. And a couple of cowboys at the bar took off their hats and started moving over, and people started coming. I thought, oh, great, it's going to be a hell of a fight.
Yeah.
And so, oh, this guy's wearing a belt knife. Oh, there's another belt knife. So I said to the magician in front of me, who hadn't seen any of this, I said, we're going out that door. There's going to be a bad fight. See, I was thinking like a martial artist.
Right.
We're going out that door. We only have to handle anyone who gets between us and the door, but we're leaving. And he turned around and he sized up the situation in couple of seconds, and then he walked over to the biggest, hairiest, massive biker, said hello, and his girlfriend was sitting there with the cigarette, and who told him promptly what he could go do with himself. But then the biker snatched the cigarette out of her hand and looked around, and everyone froze. And then he blew a perfect smoke ring, and he vanished the cigarette. You could have heard a pin drop. for about 10 seconds. And then the big guy, the big biker, he starts laughing and says, magic, man, I love magic. Do something for me. So he did about 10 minutes of impromptu magic out of his pockets. And he had a deck of cards with him. And then he said, okay, yeah, I'll do some. Let's move these tables so that everyone can see. So all the kung fu in the world couldn't have done that.
Wow.
I thought, wow, still thinking like a martial artist, I thought that was power. That was amazing. Now I realize what a way to connect with people.
Yeah.
And to get people's attention. So years later, I had been working for the Forest Service, and the government slashed, and this was in, I lost my Forest Service job, and I went into business for myself as a storyteller, doing stories about nature, and working at, did a lot of gigs at eco fairs in British Columbia, all around the provinces, and coming up with stories about and the theme was the magic of nature. So I wanted to find a way to get some more impact in the stories of magic.
There you go.
Yeah. So the very first effect I ever created was I wanted to get the idea of how magical nature is. And so I would ask the children. So I created my own effect. I didn't know anything about magic still. Then I came up with my own effect. It was I would ask the children, kids sitting around, what is it? What does a tree need to grow? And I would elicit from the kids sun, soil, air, water, and space. Okay, so here's some space, and it was a picture frame, an empty picture frame with just a blank piece of paper sitting in it. And then I had some jars, mason jars, and I tipped and a mixing bowl, and I put some something from the jar into the bowl, and the jar said soil. But then I had some powdered sunshine, very hard to find. Nice. And powdered air, powdered water, mix them all up with a little imagination and sprinkle them into the space. And then now this was simply on the back of the card behind, framed by the picture frame, was a whole bunch of magnets glued in the shape of a tree.
Oh, cool.
So, and all of the material was iron filings. It was all iron filings.
Oh,
so
wow.
When I sprinkled it into the shape of a tree would precipitate out of all these ingredients.
That's cool.
And the kids would yell, magic. I said,
that's
yes,
cool.
That's what puts all the ingredients together into a tree. Magic. What did you have for breakfast, Susie? I had a donut. And what did you have? Well, I had bacon and eggs. Well, the same magic in you is taking donuts and bacon and eggs and organizing them into little boy, little girl. Would you like to see some more? So I would go on, tell another story, and I would gradually add more effects that made sense to me to illustrate principles in the stories that I was telling. So it all started, so that effect with the tree and the iron filings is a great metaphor for how I make magic now. I've got a core idea that I want to make manifest. So then I gather all my ingredients, which are now methods, techniques, which includes electronics, but not always.
Right.
But I always begin with the idea that I want to get across. And then I look for the method and combining those methods to manifest the effect that I'm picturing in my head. An example is later on. I saw Max Maven perform Karatsuke.
Okay.
Fantastic. When Max Maven's Video Mind series came out, I think that Karatsuke was pretty well the most popular routine in that entire series. And it instantly became a mentalism classic. Everyone was performing it, and all sorts of variations were coming up. But I thought, okay, now if I could do this for real, what would it look like? Well, I wouldn't have to touch the stones. I wouldn't
Right.
have to touch the bag, and there would be no equivoque. I would know for sure who had that black stone
Right.
right from the start. Then when I could focus on the delivery and the performance. So,
Yeah.
okay, how can I do electronics? That's like shooting fish in a barrel. So I got a black bag and I put a radio frequency transmitter in, some magnetic sensors in the bottom, which my wife kindly sewed up for me. And I made the electronics really simple. And I had my first receiver was nearly the size of a telephone book. I mean, it was about, about 6 inches long and 4 inches across. But it was just a little light that I would put at the back of the room where I was performing. The black stone, and the black stone was a magnetic, had a magnet in it, and 4 white stones, and those went in the bag. And then I wouldn't have to touch anything. I gave a participant would pick up the stones, another participant would hold the bag, they would put the stones in the bag, and then a participant, a member of the audience, would carry the bag around the audience.
Right.
And rather than the performer having to do it. And I would just watch the light, and as soon as the light went out, I knew who had the black stone.
Wow.
So, and I had met Peter Nardi the year before, owner of Alakazam Magic, and he and I got along great. And so I called him, and interesting, and we were talking about Karatsuke, and then interestingly enough, he said, and coincidences like this happen to me all the time, Daniel. I mean, real magic happens all the time to me. And this is an example. We were talking about Karatsuke, and he said, you know who came in the other day? Somebody came in looking for a version of Karatsuke in which you didn't have to touch the stones and you didn't have to touch the bag. And he wanted to know for sure who had the black stone. And I said, oh, what did you tell him? And Peter said that it couldn't be done. I said, oh, well, as a matter of fact, that's exactly what I've done. And so then we marketed it, and he taught me how to market an effect. So he released Equinox for me through Alakazam. Okay. And then I established Taylor Imagineering, but nobody knew me, so we were marketing it through Alakazam.
Oh, okay.
About a month later, another piece of magic happened. I had been, by then I was doing magic full time, performing and building Equinox and working on new stuff. And I was a classroom teacher, full-time classroom teacher.
Oh, nice.
And
I bet you were the coolest teacher.
Well, I had a lot of kids who wanted to be in my class. And then I was absolutely exhausted. And one day my wonderful wife said, you know, if you wanted to leave teaching and do this magic stuff full time, as long as your company earns its own keep, you don't get to use any of our savings, right. Go for it. You could do it. Really? I thought, will you marry me? This was, we were already married. But that night, Daniel, that very night, just about to start getting ready for bed, and the telephone rings. And it was David Copperfield.
No way.
Yeah. David Copperfield called me and said, Equinox, it's brilliant. I love it. Can you make me a couple that work a little bit differently? And I'm talking on the phone. And I said, you're going to pay me how much?
Yeah,
I can do that. I can do that. And then I hung up, and then my wife said, that wasn't who I think it is, was it? And I said, yeah, that was David Copperfield. He really likes Equinox. And then my wife said, bless her heart, she said, the universe has spoken. And the rest, as they say, is history. And then I cut way back on my teaching, and Taylor Imagineering just took right off because I was putting so much more effort into it, able to, market better and make get my name and my ideas out there. And so Daniel, real magic does happen.
That's awesome.
It absolutely does.
That's fantastic. You mentioned your work at the Forest Service. at the first part of that, and I wanted to bring out, this blew my mind. This is a fact that I heard the other day. So, Chris, what would you guess there are more of, stars in the Milky Way or trees on the planet Earth?
Well, the first guess is stars in the Milky Way, but because you're asking the question, I would suspect trees on Earth.
Yeah, trees on the planet. There are more trees on the planet Earth than there are stars in the Milky Way.
That's fantastic. It's a shame we're losing so many of them.
Isn't that mind-boggling though?
It is mind-boggling. Yeah.
Yeah, pretty crazy. So yeah. I had to throw that out there because you mentioned that. So, Chris, what was your first, other than I guess really David Copperfield probably was your first really aha moment. Was there any others where it just was like magic is what I was meant to do? And
oh, wow. That's a really good question. Just before I realized that I had a talent for putting ideas together to create magic effects that I could visualize. I remember watching Ghostbusters, the original Ghostbusters. And, when Bill Murray's character said that maybe this was meant to happen, we were meant to start our own business.
Right.
Something twigged in me. I thought, that sounds like, that just appeals to me so much.
Yeah.
And then it was years later that, look, I've started my own business. Yeah, so I think that was quite an aha moment, but it was very subtle and kind of something I kept in the back of my mind for a very long time. The idea of working for myself. I mean, it's very scary giving up a regular paycheck.
Yeah.
And jumping in, and you at the beginning every month you start with zero income.
Yeah.
And then the month goes, and so I have to. I fortunately the creative juices haven't dried up, and that I attribute to the fact that I perform regularly.
Good.
I find that if I go for a long period of time, more than a few weeks, without performing, I'm not thinking of, new ideas are not occurring to me, and my desire to create just begins to dwindle, and so I'm really fortunate in that I have a regular gig at a restaurant. I've been there for 7 years now. And I'm there every Saturday, and I performed what is usually called table hopping. I go from table to table.
Okay.
And I'm basically practically one of the family for the owners of the restaurant now. It's a really nice Indian restaurant, just fantastic food. So I get to bring great Indian food home every weekend too. But so if I'm not traveling, or if I don't have a corporate gig, I'm there. And that's my testing ground for all of my new material.
Nice.
And so it works out really, really well. And I would urge any performer, excuse me, that anyone interested in creating or feels that creative urge in the magic field, that you begin by performing.
Right.
And because something will occur to you, a better way of doing something, a different way of doing something. You'll change your vision of the kind of effects that you want to create, and then you'll find you'll need to look for a way to achieve what you want to achieve. And that's my own creative process anyway. My first book, the title of my first book that I released through H&R Magic Books years ago, was called Inside Out, because that's the label I give to my creative process. I work from the inside out, kind of like sprinkling iron filings on a hidden magnet. Yeah. So, you know, every time, speaking personally, you know, I know that there are other magic creators have different creative processes, but my talents seem to come into focus and seem to align when I do work from the inside out, when I have a clear vision that I want to get at. For example, my PK touch.
Okay.
When Banachek, all hail Banachek.
Yes, he's awesome.
He is awesome, yeah. But when he brought PK touches to our fraternity, to our community, wow, what an absolutely fantastic concept.
Oh yeah.
What a magnificent concept. And then so what? Sure, it's telekinesis technically.
And Chris, just real quick for my listeners who are laymen and not magicians, just just briefly describe what PK touch is.
Well, the concept of a PK touch is, as Banachek first described it, he knew somebody who loved women, and many people love women, and a particularly attractive woman walked by this gentleman, and he longed to be able to touch her. And even though she was at a distance, he just longed to be able to touch her. And she suddenly spun around and looked at him.
Okay.
As if he had touched her from a distance. And that gave him an idea, Banachek says. So then he can develop a secret method for him to touch someone and have someone else on the other side of the room feel that first person's touch.
Okay.
And so that's the original PK touch method.
Okay.
Now, because there are muggles apparently that watch this, I'm not going to reveal Banachek's method.
That's good.
But because it's certainly not mine to reveal. But I thought, if I could do that for real, what would it look like?
Right.
Well, I would have two people seated on opposite sides of the stage. They would be seated rather than standing for a very particular reason, because I would touch one person, openly touch one person, and then at exactly the same time, I would have the other person react somehow.
Yeah.
So there would be no ambiguity in the minds of the audience that when I touched this person at that very moment, the other person felt it, even though there was this distance between them. So I have them seated and I give them directions. Please close your eyes and relax and bring your attention to the upper part of your body here. And the reason why I want you to keep your attention there is because in a moment, I hope you will feel a touch. The very moment you feel a touch, I want you to stand up and open your eyes. And then I walk over to one of them. The other person is all alone on the other side of the stage. I tap this person in front of me on the back, and they both stand up together at exactly the same time.
That's brilliant.
The audience gasps.
Yeah.
So that's what I wanted to do, and it took me 2 years to find a method to do that. And now the method. Sure, go ahead.
Can I interject here? Because you did that when I saw you in Salt Lake.
I did.
And I've seen that before, but I did gasp at that part because I knew what was coming, but how you did that and how you were clear over there, and when she stood up and you touched his shoulder, wow, that was awesome. So
I'm glad. Thank you. That's a very typical response from the audience.
Yeah.
Well, as I say, it took me 2 years to figure out a way to do that. I had to have I wanted to be able to have complete control. And I wanted the moment I touched one person, I wanted the other person feel that, and I didn't want there to be any awkward moments after the fact.
Right.
I didn't want there to be anything on either of the participants. I didn't want anything to be seen on or near the chairs. And eventually I discovered a secret that I've never seen in print anywhere about the human mind, about our brains and our skin. But I won't go into that now.
Yeah,
don't
do that.
Yeah, but once I discovered that, then the rest was really easy. It was very, very counterintuitive.
Wow, that's fantastic.
Yeah. So yeah, and now I've gone through several versions of that, and it's, of all the things I've created, it's my favorite toy my favorite invention.
It's pretty awesome, and wow, it just made me feel that magical feeling again. And thank you so much for that. That was great.
My pleasure.
Chris, we're kind of narrowing down. We might have to do a 2-part episode because you're just so fun to talk to. But
thank you.
I want to know, you mentioned starting out on your own and, without a paycheck and how hard that is. What advice would you give to anybody really kind of on the verge of wanting to maybe quit their full-time jobs to do what they love and their passion? What advice would you give to them to start out and maybe to give them the motivation to do it?
Well, the first thing I would say is that there's a reason why a lot of people don't do it. I would say stay true to your passion, the passion that you have for magic. That you have to start there, and let that lead you, because you really, really have to love what you do, and find the energy in that because you're in store for 18-hour days, 7 days a week.
Yeah.
All year, all the time. It's a tremendous amount of work, but at least that's what it looks like from the outside.
Right.
Personally, I don't work. I haven't worked a day in a day since I quit teaching.
Wow.
Because I love what I do so much.
Yeah.
And it really doesn't. My leisure time and my work are indistinguishable. So I consider myself very, very lucky, and I think that is a goal that that is worth keeping in mind if you're about to try and launch this kind of business.
That's awesome. Yeah.
It has to come, once again, from the inside out. And the other thing I would say is the air is full of great ideas. They are everywhere. But every one of those ideas will require countless hours to bring to fruition.
Yeah.
So don't rush.
Yeah.
Every effect has its own time. Like I said, it took me 2 years to create my PK touch method.
Wow.
But when you get it, you can't, serve no magic effect. Rush to get out no magic effect. It'll happen in its own time.
I like that. Let's do a random question, and then we'll do some wrap up here with you.
Okay.
And we haven't even really touched anything else that I sent you, but that's okay because this has been awesome. So, random question, Chris: if you were to go back in time, I love time travel. And so this is the question I like to ask. If you can go back in time and could perform for anybody historical or anybody that maybe has inspired you, who would you do a magic trick for? What would the magic trick be? And why and how would you think they would react to that trick?
Wow. That's really interesting. I would, I think the person that I would perform for would be known, certainly not famous. I would want to perform for my Kung Fu teacher.
Okay.
Because when I was studying with my Kung Fu teacher, I wasn't practicing magic.
Okay.
I would perform my ashes on the hand effect, which is called Hero. And I think he would absolutely love it. And I think he would find it enchanting.
I love it. That's awesome.
And perhaps he would say, yeah, that you're spending your time wisely is what nice. I hope how he would react. Yes.
Excellent.
Yeah.
What's in the future for Christopher Taylor?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm really excited about a new book I'm writing.
Oh, wow.
It's on, as I mentioned, I began as a storyteller. And I'm writing a book on the working title is Re-Enchantment, bringing traditional storytelling methods to modern magic and mentalism.
Wow.
Bringing stories to our magic or mentalism nowadays is really popular.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people are studying script writing techniques. They're looking to television script writers, play writers, even novelists. But storytelling predates the written word. There were storytellers centuries before we learned how to write. We learned how to tell stories. And the methods that oral storytellers use for creating stories and for presenting stories are very, very different than stories we create. So we use different parts of the brain when we write, and Hopkins University have just proven this, that we use different parts of the brain to write than we do to speak. So stories created for telling are different than stories created to be read, or even stories that are written with the intention to read out loud. Storytellers don't recite stories. They tell it they know it by heart, and it becomes it lives in their mind, and they share what's going on in their mind fresh every time. It's not a recitation. So anyway, I want to offer this alternative approach to bringing story to your magic.
Awesome. I love it. Well, and I think a lot of times that the effect can be very just minuscule, and the whole story really pulls it together, and that's what he did this amazing thing, but he told this story, and I think the story is what really makes it.
You would have seen some examples at my show in Salt Lake City when you were there.
Yes. Yep. I think I remember almost all of it. The prison guard.
Right.
So, yeah, fantastic. Really well done.
Thank you.
Where can people get a hold of you and have you out for gigs and hire you and all that fun stuff?
The easiest way to get a hold of me is through email, which is info@taylorimagineering.com. You can find my website, which is www.taylorimagineering.com. There's a contact form there. I love lecturing. I love doing workshops because, well, I'm a teacher at heart, teacher and a storyteller. So I'm always up for that. And I welcome any inquiries along those lines, as well
Awesome.
as people who have questions about my products, of course.
We need to have you back here in Utah/Idaho and maybe do a lecture for us.
I'd love to.
That'd be great. One final question. This is a fairly new podcast. I started in December. You're my 18th guest. And so I love referrals. The only catch is you have to put me in touch with them. So who do you think would be awesome? And it doesn't even have to be a magician, somebody just talented.
Okay.
That you could refer to me that would be fun and be great to have on the show.
Well, can I give you two?
Absolutely.
Both really good friends of mine and immensely talented. One, an immensely talented performer who is just on fire right now, and that would be Matt Johnson. And the other is Andreas Strebling, who is from Sweden. He owns a company called Metal Writing, and he is one of the most talented craftsmen. He's also a wonderful performer. His approach to giving readings is just phenomenal as well. He's a wonderful performer and very, very talented individual. And if you don't know Matt Johnson, well, just Google him. And
I don't know him personally, but I know of him, and I think he's fantastic. So yeah, that'll be great. Thank you so much. Any final thoughts, Chris?
Wow. I'm sure my wife will be surprised to hear that I'm pretty well talked out, I guess. But no, I want to thank you, Daniel, for expressing interest and for your very kind words about my work. And I want to say that I have thoroughly enjoyed our time together.
Well, it's 62 minutes has gone by like a blink of an eye, and it was fascinating. And you are, and I told you in Salt Lake City, you are who I aspire to be like as a performer. And so I think it's fantastic, and I really look forward to learning from you some more. And I'm glad you're a friend of the show.
My pleasure. Thanks again, Daniel.
Hey, thank you, Chris. Have a good night.
Good night.
And we will stop the recording.